Hello and welcome to this IsleVote21 meeting for the Isle of Wight County Council seat of Shanklin Central. A brief word for the public. IsleVote21 has been formed with the sole purpose of enhancing democracy by providing an unbiased platform for candidates. We have no affiliations or funding, and no candidates are aware of what questions will be asked today, although a list of topics was distributed in advance to enable candidates to prepare. All 138 candidates in this year's election have been invited, either directly or via group and party leaders. For this meeting, the following candidates were invited, who are all standing for the Shanklin Central board. We have David Morse of the Green Party, who's in attendance today. Thank you, David. And also invited were Kenneth Crawley of the Labour Party, Michael Beston of the Conservative Party, and Robert May standing as an independent candidate. Robert May also sent his apologies, saying that he's unable to attend due to a prior work engagement. Candidates today will be asked, well, I say candidates. David, I'll be asking you questions from our pool of questions, plus others that have been submitted by the public regarding island-wide issues. Candidates have been informed that there is a 2-minute limitation on answers, and I will raise my hand when we get close to that 2-minute limit. But before I start with questions for you, David, I would like to invite you to give us a 2-minute opening statement.
Hello, I'm David Morse, the Green Party candidate for Shanklin Central. I've lived here on the island since 1984 when I came to teach field studies at Medina Valley Centre. So I quickly got to know and to love our whole island. For the last 37 years, I've been devoted to education on the island, having the privilege to work in primary, middle, high and special schools in senior roles, including head teacher. I've lived in Shanklin for 13 years. It's a fantastic town. My wife, 3-year-old son and I have really grown to love living here, the location and the community. And although I'm now retired, I continue to support students both in schools and online through one-to-one tuition in science and maths. The single reason that I'm standing for election in Shanklin Central is that our island deserves so much better. We desperately need different priorities for a very different and much better future. Economically better, ethically better, and of course, environmentally better. Economically better, a properly drawn up contract for the new floating bridge would have saved millions and provided a better service into the bargain. Ethically better, our £16 million pension fund should not be supporting fossil fuel industries. Had the pension fund been invested in Tesla for the last 12 months, it would have grown by some 400%. Can anyone honestly say that fossil fuels are the best option for long-term investments? Environmentally better, the council should both lead by example and make greener options more accessible to all, and support for individuals and organisations who are working towards this end. It's tragic that in the last council elections that the runaway winners were those who didn't vote, 60% in 2017. That means your vote matters, and it matters now more than ever. You can make a difference and vote for better this time. So I would urge you to consider voting green for Shanklin, voting green for the Isle of Wight, and voting green for better.
Thank you very much, David. Thanks for your opening statement. Always great to hear these. Okay, we're going to move on to our questions now. The first question for you, and for all candidates, I've been reading them out twice, simply to give us a bit of time to process and mull things over before diving into answers. Our first question is, do you have specific projects in mind that you would pursue in the council? Do you have specific projects in mind that you would pursue in the council?
I've got to say there are several, endless, but in an attempt to answer this question with what I perceive as being an absolutely crucial project, that is mental health. Mental health is at the moment being managed on an extremely stretched social services. The social services themselves are depleted and overstretched, and dealing with crisis containment, rather than fixing the causes or avoiding the causes. So I know projects, long-term projects, are not popular with politicians because they might not be there to see the fruit of their labours, but I see a wellness and mental health project from the womb to the grave to be a #1 priority. We need to build resilience and build strength in young people and the elderly and everybody in between. And it starts with antenatal. In fact, it probably starts before then, but antenatal and teaching prospective parents the sheer capacity of the human brain and the capacity to make positive differences to that individual that's growing inside them. And then, of course, it goes on to the early years, preschool. Sometimes there's a great big gap between your antenatal classes and going to reception. And families are left just to make it up as best they can with the most precious years of a young life. And so mental health from womb to grave has to be my #1 priority.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for raising that. On to our next question. Can you name a major problem that the island is facing and suggest a solution? Can you name a major problem that the island's facing and suggest a solution?
A major problem, the major problem is climate change. Few people know that with a 2.5, maybe 3 meter rise in sea level, which is very, very possible in the not too distant future, there could be swathes of the island submerged from Brading all the way through to Arreton. Now that is a huge section of the Isle of Wight. It's not something that we can wait until it is actually happening to desperately try to stop it. It's something that we all need to take action on now. And the two biggest contributors to climate change are domestic energy use and transport. So there needs to be a massive and very significant push to support effective and efficient homes and more efficient in terms of energy use and also in terms of CO2 emissions, transport for the Isle of Wight.
Thank you very much, David. Moving on to our next question. What could the council do to inspire residents to take more pride in the island? What could the council do to inspire residents to take more pride in the island?
Well, gosh, I am proud to be a member of a group that I recently discovered on Facebook, who are the most positive group of people out there. There's about 700 called Vectis Wombles. It's worth checking out. Find their Facebook website. There is pictures, picture after picture after picture every single day of great bags of rubbish that have been collected. And there are 700 plus people out there doing this on a weekly, if not daily basis. So encouraging groups like that, could they have support instead of out of their own pocket accessing litter pickers and bags, etc.? Could we have a coordinated approach and use island roads to collect the waste? That could help the people who are already making that positive difference. Another thing is rewilding. Increasing biodiversity doesn't have to come at great expense. There are places within our town, Shanklin, which could easily have a component of rewilding put in there at minimal cost and actually reduce the maintenance, because if there's an open space of grass that doesn't need to be mown anymore because it's left as a wild place, that will reduce long-term costs, albeit there might be some setup costs for it, but it's an investment. And you say about how across the island there could be an increase in pride. Well, maybe. How about the best rewilding project, or a rewilding village award, or something like this, to put it out there, because people do love a little bit of competition nowadays, and I think that might go down a treat.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, all right, we're going to move on to some questions from the public. Our first question is, how would you work to encourage less reliance on motor vehicles and develop more sustainable methods of transport? How would you work to encourage less reliance on motor vehicles and develop more sustainable methods of transport?
Well, less reliance on motor vehicles and more sustainable. I like the way you've asked the question, actually, because often it's bolted together as one, but it's two distinct issues. If we use the most sustainable methods of transport, but we still use them too much, we will still be consuming too much energy. So we do need to reduce the need for powered transport. And quite clearly, we can either reduce transport, in other words, people stay and work from home. Not all people can do that, but if we can maximize that, then obviously that will reduce, and we've seen through the pandemic the pollution benefits in a number of cities around the world from reduced transport. But also there's the weaning ourselves off petroleum-based transport and onto cleaner transport. Now, ideally, that would be self-propelled transport, walking, running, bicycles. But again, that's not for everybody. And there will need to be, for electric cars to become much more accessible, there would need to be a massive decrease in price or support to enable them to be purchased or leased. And of course, the infrastructure to maintain the charge. Okay, you've waved that. I mean, I'll stop there. I think those sorts of issues have been fairly well aired across the board. So I'll leave that there. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Okay, our next question from the public is about adult education. Adult education on the island is limited. What would you do to encourage organisations on the island to provide opportunities in this area? What would you do to encourage organisations on the island to provide adult education opportunities in the area?
Okay, first of all, adult education has got a number of purposes, and it links in with the mental health, well-being. It also links in with the sort of self-worth and so forth, but also it can be functional to retrain for a new job or to train for a job in the first place. And so there are, as I see it, there's enrichment adult education, and there is sort of employment adult education. And sometimes they run hand in hand. But I've seen a great little store in Shanklin has set up. I don't know if I'm allowed to name stores, but I'm going to. It's brilliant. On Your Bike is a store in Shanklin set up, and the guy is not only recycling cycles, literally, and taking in dilapidated old ones and pushing them out all spick and span and safe. But also the project there is not just to get people on a bike at low cost, but also to actually give people opportunity to train up as bike engineers, and to be part of the project themselves and train individuals how to fix their own bike. So again, that's adult education for reward, but also adult education just for sheer entertainment and keeping healthy and well and getting out and about at as low cost as possible. So I don't see why it wouldn't be possible to have some kind of incentive in terms of grants for businesses who would take on the training of individuals, not as an extra employee, but the responsibility to train in whatever way, and there could be a graded scale of council support for those.
Thank you, David. Some interesting ideas. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to a question about housing. We received from the public many questions on housing. There is a need for homes on the island to address a shortage of housing that matches the local situation, especially for those looking to rent. But an environmental cost comes with every new house built in terms of losing green space and the required infrastructure. How should the council, within the bounds of its powers, seek to create more homes for islanders whilst balancing the environmental costs of more building? How should the council, within the bounds of its powers, seek to create more homes for islanders whilst balancing the environmental costs of more building?
First of all, there are quite a considerable number of empty homes, and that isn't the holiday homes, but it is just homes that are, for whatever reason, empty at the moment. Now, they might not actually be fit for rental at the moment, but if there is a property that is that has potential for rental, and the council can support in identifying the owners, and see how many more of these we can actually get up and running. Now, it is a massive cost to house a family in bed and breakfast, say, but that money could potentially be used to make accessible a house for them to live in permanently. So it is not necessarily as expensive as it might sound, because you're spending money that you would have spent elsewhere. You spending money to plug a hole in the dam, or you're spending money to fix the dam, you know, and so using buildings that are currently available is point number one. Secondly, brownfield sites with projects that will yield properties that are highly energy efficient for the future, so that there is the minimal environmental cost there, but also ones that are built for people and not for profit, because it has to be affordable. And again, planning regulations can be adjusted to make sure that these priorities are put in place, and landlords and builders can all play their part and can all benefit, as can the people who purchase or rent the properties. So it's win-win all round if we get it right.
Thank you. Yes, okay, thanks, David. I'm going to move on to a question about our high streets. What will you do to address the empty shops in each town? The main streets are dying. What should the council do to specifically address this issue? What should the council do to specifically address the issue of empty shops?
Okay, well, the Green Party suggests that there is an 18-month holiday on business rates for small startups. That could make the difference between a quick turnover of shops, as sometimes happens in high streets. A business opens up and then next year it's closed, and a business opens up and next year it's closed, or it just remains closed. The first 18 months to 2 years of establishing a business and getting a clientele and getting the initial investment returned is big, and so we suggest that that is a key. It's not the only key, but it is a key to making the startup in a high street become a reasonably accessible financial possibility for people, especially if they can incorporate what I've said before about additional grants for training and having that kind of public service within their store, whatever it may be, because whatever store it is, it's possible to train people in the skills that are required, that they may then be able to go and take somewhere else in employment.
Great, thank you, David. Thank you for asking our variety of questions that we've had from the public and from our pool of questions. And I'd like to ask you a final question before your closing statement, specifically about your area, Shanklin Central. Knowing your local community as you do, what local issue would you like to address that you know is of concern to residents? What local issue would you like to address that you know is of concern to residents?
Well, a number of people have talked to me about lots of these issues that I've raised. So all of those kind of fall under that umbrella, whether it's rewilding or littering or shops, etc. But on another dimension, there are concerns about parking. Now, there are concerns about costs of parking, costs for locals parking, and inability to park at all sometimes in summer. So parking is a major issue. Now, parking charges should not be used as a money-making tool. They should be used to manage traffic flow, and having one hour of free parking for locals where there are charges, I think would help. It would help local businesses, but it would help turnover in the parking spaces, and it would also enable locals to make that call or to make that stop at less cost, and we also actually need to look at traffic flows. For goodness sake, sometimes, or there was one time where there was only one route out of Shanklin because there was roadworks here and roadworks there. A little bit more people talking to each other about what's being dug up where might help traffic flows immensely. Yeah, so traffic and car parking are definitely issues that we can have some inventive and innovative ideas that perhaps can make a big difference, and positively.
Great. Thank you, David. Thanks for all of your considered answers today. And I'd like to now invite you to give a short closing statement and/or reflect on today's process.
Thank you. We're now suffering after 10 years of brutal cuts nationally, and our next council will have nearly £2,000 million of your money to spend over its term in office. Your vote could help to make sure that it's put to best use for the island instead of being frittered away on vanity projects such as the failure that is school restructuring, the failure that is the chain ferry fiasco, and the failure to understand the indeterminate cost of accepting full liability for Camp Hill roads. The list goes on. We need to seed new growth into ethical, environmental, and economically viable businesses and projects that will ultimately yield a return on that investment through employment opportunities, tourism, business rates, etc. We can do this by supporting local businesses that have those same aims through an 18-month business rate holiday for small startups. Housing development must be environmentally sensitive on brownfield sites built for people, not for profit. We need open-minded thinking on how to support best those people most in need. Food banks are not the answer, although they are a lifeline for many at the moment. They should not be needed in the UK. A trial of a universal basic income here, as the Green Party proposes, has the potential to model solutions for the rest of the country. There's a real urgency to maximise energy efficiency of both housing and transport, sustainable energy projects that return financial benefits to the community and don't merely siphon off the profits to off-island investors. It's an investment and is peanuts in comparison to the long-term cost of not investing now. As we've learned with the pandemic, if we let things accelerate and get too far, it's much, much harder and costlier to reverse the problem. With these priorities, we can build communities that have immense pride, that are attractive to visitors and where individuals feel they can make a positive difference. This feeds back into positive mental health and wellness and starts a positive spiral for better. Economically better, ethically better, environmentally better, all go hand in hand with the Green Party. Vote to make a positive difference on May the 6th. Vote Green for better in Shanklin. Thank you.
Thank you, David Morse. Thank you for taking part in this opportunity to speak to the voters within your area. We really appreciate your engagement in the project. Many thanks.
Thank you ever so much indeed. Can I just have a question, please?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. You're still recording. I meant to ask you afterwards. Sorry.
Oh, an informal question. Okay. All right. Well, we'll close formal proceedings. Thank you again.